Yay. Welcome back to Coaching Corner or Conversations, depending where you're at. One of these days, we'll probably just end up both on the same one. It'll end up that way. But so today we are doing modalities of communication, the different ways you can communicate. Mm-hmm. And by that, we mean face-to-face or over text, email, handwritten letter. Sometimes a combination of the two. So this was your topic. Do you want to start like where your thoughts and feelings came from?
So I feel like I was raised to believe that all important communication, whether it's a hard conversation or otherwise, important communication should happen face-to-face. Mm-hmm. Unless it's like business and then it needs to be in writing, right? But that's not what we're talking about here. And now over the last few years, I'm starting to think a big fat fuck you to that. And so I just wanted us to kind of discuss it and like share both of our thoughts and feelings around all of it. And, you know, what is good, what is not good, what is healthy, what is not healthy. Who gets to make the rules about these things?
So my thoughts on this come up pretty easily because I happen to be living with two partners who both have different preferences. I am a face-to-face person. I want to see your body language. I want to hear your tone. That is my communication needs, but theirs are very different from mine. And so as far as there being a right or wrong, there is no objective right or wrong, but the people communicating need to find a balance that works for them. So like, okay, so with Jerry, if I have something big that I want to talk to him about, his preference is that I write the gist of it out in text first and give him time to process. Like assume that it will be at least 24 hours before I hear from him about it. Mm-hmm. Okay. But then he will come talk to me face to face. And so that's the expectation that we've set. Do I always remember to do that first? No. But he also knows that if I start bringing something up in person, he can say, wait, back up. I need it in text first. I need time to process. I need to be able to read it multiple times to make sure I'm understanding. That doesn't happen often because we have such strong communication skills between the two of us. But that's what we worked out between the two of us. And then Chris, on the other hand, Chris likes to come with receipts to conversations. And his memory is not that great. He will tell you that he remembers things just fine, but I have my own receipts that say otherwise. So we do a lot of communicating about things in text, just for that purpose. And there's also a distinction too. So like with Jerry, he wants to get everything all at once. He doesn't like little this and then this and then this and then this, where Chris is the exact opposite. He wants little bits that he can respond to one at a time. And so like adjusting that communication style too is part of it, in like making sure that things are balanced. But yeah, so it really just depends on what the needs of the people are and like how you operate best.
Yeah. I wonder if this is something that contributed to me being a people pleaser, because I was raised to believe that you need to have hard conversations face to face. Well, first of all, texting didn't exist, right? Until we were teenagers, late teenagers even. And so that wasn't an option. And like nobody, even still growing up, nobody really communicated in email either. And so it was like on the phone, or if you lived with the person, face to face, right? But my family, we didn't talk about feelings. We talked about like, you fucked up, you did this wrong, you're disappointing me in this way, but like not about feelings. And so I didn't really have a whole lot of practice. And as I got older and like needed to have hard conversations, it just made me so uncomfortable. The idea of bringing something up to somebody face to face made me so uncomfortable that I would avoid it, because if it was something that might upset them, or I didn't know how they were going to react, or they were going to be disappointed, like I didn't want to see that disappointment, right? I have a hard enough time with my own feelings. I couldn't also then be processing and dealing with and like, seeing other people's feelings as well. And so I would just keep the peace because that was easier.
Right.
And it wasn't until, let's see, February 2020, I had a friend that I had said something to her that upset her. And she sent me a Marco Polo message about it a couple of days later. She needed time to like process and everything like that. And she was like, my preference would be to have this conversation in person, but I don't know when we're going to see each other next. And I don't want to keep not saying anything about it. And so like, you said this thing and here's how it made me feel and blah, blah, all the things. And I loved it, because if she had brought that up to me in person, I don't know, like I wouldn't have had a moment kind of like Jerry to process it on my own and come up with my response. But I did have time. And so then I sent her a response back, and she told me, she was like, that was possibly the best apology I've ever received in my life. And she's a friend that she and her boyfriend at the time, she would tell me about like, oh yeah, like we just had to have this conversation. We just had to have this conversation. And like all these like really hard conversations in person. And I was just constantly like, oh my gosh, I'm so amazed that you're able to like have all these hard conversations, and like you've got the guts and to the courage to bring them up. And then I met you. And this isn't something you and I don't think have ever explicitly talked about. But there's just been times where like in conversation, you've talked about like texting or whatever, or like when, you've been coaching me on things and I'm like, oh, I want to talk to this person about it. Like I'm thinking of sending them a text. Not once did you ever say, don't you think that's like the scaredy cat way out of it is sending them a text instead of doing it in person? And so I was like, oh, maybe this is okay. So then fast forward to my current partner. And when we have hard conversations, he prefers to have them in person. And he knows that I apparently am a lot like Jerry. I can have them in person. But my brain functions better a lot of the time when I'm writing. Because then I can like write it out and be like, oh, that's not exactly what I meant, and like delete it and like reread it, right? And so I can like fine tune my response, and it's not like I'm curating it, trying to like, oh, I need to say the right thing for them. It's, I want to make sure that what I'm thinking or feeling is coming out as clear as possible.
And words fucking matter. The way you say it matter.
Yeah. Exactly. And sometimes I do need time to process it. And so Logan will ask me now, like, hey, I have something. I mean, it's been a while since we've had to have a hard conversation actually, but, hey, there's something I want to talk to you about. Would you prefer that do you want to have the conversation in person? Do you want me to text you about it? Do you want me to Marco Polo you? And, we do have face-to-face hard conversations also. But the permission that it doesn't all have to be face-to-face means that more conversations happen. Because it's not that I'm trying to hide from the other person or trying to hide from the other person's feelings, but like, I have an avoidant attachment style, and I wasn't raised expressing or talking about my feelings at all. And so for me to identify my feelings takes a lot of work. And so then to feel comfortable talking about them face to face with another person, I'm like, I am barely comfortable feeling the feelings by myself. And I need to experience it with someone else. I'm not ready.
Too, when you've had trauma, like sometimes your knee-jerk reaction, your knee-jerk feeling that comes up is not what you actually feel. But if somebody witnesses that, it can derail your entire conversation.
Yes. And so that's something that it definitely happens. Like I'll notice my initial reaction is, oh my gosh, I feel this way. And I'm like, but why do I feel this way? Like what's underneath it? So there's something bigger there. Like, yes, I feel this way. And I could say, oh, my initial reaction is this, but what really matters is what's underneath it. And sometimes it can take me several hours or even days to figure out what that is. And so like, this is something that situation we already talked about on here, but it's probably like a month or two ago at this point, Logan had a really hard day at work. And my knee-jerk reaction was to make myself small, be quiet, stay out of his way, don't talk to him a lot, right? And I didn't even know that I was doing that, but I did notice that he wasn't really interacting with me. And so my feelings got hurt. But instead of like focusing on that, 45 minutes later is when I realized, oh, my feelings are hurt. And at first I didn't even know that my feelings were hurt. I was like, I feel something. I'm upset that he's upset and I don't know why. I do feel like that's probably not fair. So before I say anything, I should like think about it and figure it out. And it took me 45 minutes to figure out, oh, I'm behaving in this way and he's reacting to my behavior and I don't like his reaction. But like, and nobody's really wrong here.
Right. Yes, that is so important.
It took a while to figure it out. Like and he had asked me in the kitchen, he was like, what's going on with you? I was like, I don't know. Nothing. What are you talking about? And if we had like really attempted to have the conversation right then, it wouldn't have gone anywhere because I didn't have that time to reflect.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like you and I are the same person because I can just so distinctly remember those on my own. Yes. So, and also too, like, so one thing that I noticed that I really struggle with is, so like, if I'm bringing something up to somebody and it's a big deal to me, and like, even if I don't mean to have expectations, I don't try to, I have accidental expectations about how they're going to respond to me. And if their initial reaction is not in line with that, then I get distracted by that. And so then I'm like, why are you feeling this way? Instead of tackling what I wanted to talk about, now we're talking about their feelings, which is valid. Like we can totally do that. But also sometimes it gets distracting and sidetracked, and then you don't actually get around to the actual conversation because real life exists and there are time limitations sometimes. And another thing too is, so having text conversations with Chris was really difficult for me. We started doing this when we were separated, so things were already struggling to begin with, and our communication kind of sucked at that point. But I did not do well with having text conversations with him because in my mind, I was reading it and I was assigning his emotions to it, which is what we were trained to do. We were trained to assume things about people instead of just asking them. So one of the things that we started doing is we'd have the conversation via text in the same room. So I could get my needs met of seeing his body language and knowing that he's saying, I was really upset when, and he's not, I was really upset when, and he's like very neutral about the whole thing. Like, this is a fact. And so that helped build safety and communication for us in having conversations with text. And it wasn't until 2018, so 3.5, 4 years later, where we really saw how beneficial that was. He had gone to a partner's house and he had said that he would take care of a certain task around the house before he went. And he's gone. And I come to find out that he is not taking care of this task. And I was really upset because he said that it would be taken care of. And
I feel like I remember when this happened.
Yes. And so but it really hit me when I went to text him and I said, I'm really frustrated and upset that you said that you would do this thing and it's not done. And now this is the inconvenience that it's causing me. And now I either have to do this choice, which is really unpleasant, or I have to do this choice, which is unpleasant. And you put me in a predicament and I'm frustrated by it. And because we had so many text conversations face to face, he knew that I was not raging on the other end of it. He knew that I was.
You had demonstrated to him the difference between frustration and anger.
Yes.
Because I feel like so many people don't know the difference between frustration and anger.
Yes. Yes, exactly. But it's funny how we did this thing and it took 4 years to see how impactful it actually was to do that. And so that's why I'm a huge advocate. Like, that's one thing that I tell people when they come to me for communication stuff is practice texting in the same room.
Yeah. So. Something you said made me think of something.
I know how that goes.
Like assuming emotion or assuming intent with text messages. So that was something that Logan and I got to address really early on. Is I think because thanks to you, I modeled asking for clarity. First of all, I mean, the name of my business is Cultivating Clarity Coaching Services. So I've always valued clarity, but you helped me to learn that it's okay to ask more questions, and that asking more questions isn't being needy or being insecure. It's just, I don't have enough information to react or respond yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I modeled that and I asked a lot of questions for clarity. And I started encouraging him to do the same. And it looked like I can look back at our text messages over the course of several months and see how less assumptions were being made towards the end, because we're asking questions instead of assigning value to the words.
And I just want to point out something that you said too. Like, you value clarity so much that it's in your business name. And something I see all of the time is that people highly, highly value clarity, which they should. It's important. Mm-hmm. But nobody teaches us how to get that clarity. Mm-hmm. And so we have a bunch of people who desperately want clarity in their lives, but don't know how to go about getting it and don't know how to offer it to other people. Like, that was something that I really struggled with. And I know we talk about it as a neurodivergent trait too, a lot of the time, is like we over-explain ourselves because we're not sure if other people get it, because we inherently value the clarity, but we don't know what it means or what it looks like to give that clarity.
Mm-hmm. I've started kind of practicing, and this is easier in text message when you can like read and edit and everything. How can I be as clear as possible while using as few words as possible?
Where'd you learn that one?
It also reminds me of my English teacher from my freshman year of college. And she was like, specifically, I can be bad at using the word that. I need to put my coat on so that I can go to the store. And she was like, that word is not necessary. I need to put my coat on so I can go to the store. You take that word out, the sentence still makes sense. Use less words. Say what you need to say using fewer words, right? And so that's something that she taught me like in an academic way. So that's something that I've always been good about. Well, since taking her class, I've been good about that when like writing emails for business purposes, or, you know, writing a paper or something like that. But like for interpersonal communications, for my relationships, I hadn't made that connection.
I think, and you know, I am not by any means a super academic person, and particularly not in this subject, but it always really frustrated me that I had to have a minimum word count on something. And so I spent so much of my life making things bigger and fluffier for no reason. And I'm like, my paper says exactly the same thing in 900 words, but you're requiring 1200.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a common occurrence too, that people have gotten used to more means better. Like the more you write, the more you are saying. And sometimes less is more. And I like the phrasing that you use. How can I be as clear as possible with as few words as possible? Because both of those together is what makes it work.
Yeah.
Because words fucking matter.
Words absolutely matter. And not just the words you speak to other people, the words that you speak to yourself.
Yes. That's something that Chris and I still go around and round on a little bit. Is he is not as conscientious about his word choice as I am. And so I get frustrated that we have more conversations than necessary because his word choice is not as effective as it could be. And so like we had this conversation the other day, and it was addressing a couple issues, but also it was a hard conversation. So it definitely fits in this, but it was, you know, I really struggle with the fact that you are wanting to do these things. These are things that you want to do, but you are not taking responsibility for them. So he will decide that he wants to go to a specific store to get a specific ingredient for a meal that he's cooking for the family. And so instead of saying, I need to go get this thing, I need this thing, either will you get it for me or will you go with me? He just says, I need to go to get this thing. And what he thinks I'm taking from this is, or he says, we need to go get this thing. What he thinks I'm taking from this is, I want to do this for the family and I want you to go with me so we can spend time together. Mm-hmm. And then the other element to that is personal responsibility. If I'm not available, he doesn't follow through on it. And I'm like, yes, I know that you struggle with social anxiety, but I need you to sometimes just do the things and not rely on me to do the things.
Yeah.
But that was the big thing. I was like, first of all, it doesn't make me feel valued, and it doesn't make me feel like you want to spend time with me if you wait until the 15th time we've had this conversation to say, well, I just want to spend time with you. If you don't say it the first 14 times, it doesn't feel genuine. It feels like an attempt to,
here's my last ditch effort to get you to do the thing I want.
Exactly. And I was like, but also it's really important to me that you take ownership that this is a thing that you want to do. Because if I ask you to make a specific meal that needs a special ingredient, then I assume responsibility for making sure that happens. I'm not going to put extra work on you because this is something I want. You have made this decision because you want to cook this meal. You need to take responsibility and not put extra work on me just because you want to make this happen. Like, yes, I understand that you are cooking for the entire family, but nobody requested this meal. Right. So it is not fair for you to put extra work on me because of a decision that you've made. And so like getting really clear, and he's like, well, what do you want me to say to you? And I was very specific. I said, I would like you to say, I have decided that I'm going to cook this meal. I want to get this ingredient. I would like you to go with me, and I would like to do something else to spend time together. So make it a part of something else. Mm-hmm. And I would like to do it by XYZ date time.
Yeah.
And I said, the other important element too is if I choose not to, or I am not available to do that with you, go do it yourself. And don't just wait on me, because then that feels like pressure. That feels like you are obligating me to something I didn't decide to do. And so that was a really difficult conversation to have because, like,
Yeah.
You don't want to make it sound like I don't want to spend time with them, because that's not the case.
Right.
I was like, but when you put it on an obligation, it feels like it's no different than anything else that I have to do. That's part of my job, is taking care of the house and taking care of the family. So then in my mind, I may as well do it when it's convenient for me. And so then you're upset that I didn't do this thing with you, but you never actually communicated that you wanted to do it with me. And
Right.
so,
Yeah. So you said at the beginning of that, sometimes you and Chris have more conversation than is necessary because he's not being clear, right? And it reminded me that my ex and I had longer conversations than necessary, because even though I was being incredibly clear, he was assigning meaning to my words that weren't there. And these were face-to-face conversations where I would have to say the same thing to him, that it was a loop on repeat, like 5 to 7 times. And so all of our hard conversations, arguments, discussions, like not all the same, but they were all like an hour long, because he didn't know how to take what I was saying at face value, or say, it feels like you're saying this. Can you confirm? Like, this is what I'm getting from this, and it's making me feel this way. Is this right?
I actually had to call Chris out on a similar behavior the other day, because I said something about how did we end up married? And it's not a bad thing, but when we got married, we thought we had more in common, when really it was just me people pleasing and bending to be what he wanted. And he turned around in the conversation and said, well, you're talking about leaving me. And I was like, please hold. This is not what I said. What I said is, I was questioning how we ended up married, which I answered for myself. As soon as it came out of my mouth, I knew what the answer was. Because when I asked it, it was a genuine question. I wasn't trying to set him up for a trap. But as soon as I said it, I was like, oh, I was a people pleaser. I was conforming. I was following my conditioning. Like, this is how we ended up married. And I was like, this is not me saying that I'm going to leave you. This is not me saying I don't think we should be together. This is me saying, let's work through this so that we can stay together, because I genuinely enjoy being with you, but I would like there to be more substance to our relationship, which means we need to put in more effort now. And so calling out, that is not what I said. It was very intimidating for me still, even like as much as I do, it was still very intimidating to be like, no. Like, hold on, let's go back. And it's also, there's another element to it that happens in conversations. I see this a lot. If I say something about what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling or what I observed or whatever, and somebody's response is no, I automatically slide into a trauma response. I struggle so much when when I say, I really feel like you were being rude when you said whatever, and they say no, I'm like, I can't handle this. Like, I feel so invalidated. I feel like you don't care about me. I feel like you are annoyed with me, bothered with me. Like, everything that I do and say is wrong. And like, so I have to like really moderate my own trauma responses, and then also have conversations that's like, please elaborate on what you mean. Because you say no, and I don't hear, well, this is my observation of it, or I feel this way about it. I hear, you're wrong. And I'm like, not okay with that. All kinds of joy that comes with not being taught healthy communication skills.
Yeah. One thing that I am still working on is recognize, and it feels weird to admit this, but recognizing, like, when somebody has a bad day, that doesn't mean they're frustrated with me. Just like when I have a bad day and I'm expressing frustration to someone, it doesn't mean it's about that person, right?
Mhm.
And I know that from my end, but like, and I think it's different with a partner than just in a friendship. It hits different.
Mhm.
And also, even though I said it earlier in the conversation, the distinction between frustration and anger. You can be frustrated with somebody without being angry at them.
Mhm.
And you can also be angry at someone, and that doesn't mean you want to leave them.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's what I mean, like, when I talk about, like, you can have your feelings, but don't make it somebody else's problem. Don't punish somebody else for what they're feeling. Like, even if you're angry at them, doing things that you know will hurt them, slamming things around to let the whole world know that you're angry, like, have your feelings, talk about them even if you want to. Like, do whatever you need to do, but don't make it somebody else's problem that you have feelings. Because that's not okay. Except we were taught that it was okay, so it's very common.
Right. We are taught so many things.
All of the terrible things. My turn to something you said gave me a thought, and now I can't remember. Oh, so we talked about like in person and like texting and stuff, but working with my clients, a lot of people I found they use Google Docs for that because you can make notes. So you can address something that somebody says like right there in it. So you don't have to like go back and copy and paste and like whatever. So if you're having a really difficult conversation, like I was working with some people who were working through whether or not to continue their relationship. So that's a really difficult topic to cover, and having a Google Doc to be able to say this, 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 and this, and then the person can reply to just that thing. Total game changer, right?
Wow.
I thought it was brilliant. And then the other thing that I tell people about difficult conversations, so this comes up a lot with clients who are going through divorce or like custody issues with somebody. When you're talking to the other parent, I always frame it like a business email. Like write it out like you are sending a business email that will be read in court out loud. And like that's what you want to go for, because you don't want to be accusatory, you don't want to be inflammatory, you want to state the facts, you want to give all of the relevant information, you want to include everything that's necessary for making an informed decision, or you don't want to be accused of hiding things or whatever. So you want to lay it out like it's a business professional email that's going to be read in the courtroom. Not might be, going to be. You want to assume that it will be. And that also, it takes the emotional charge out of it. When you're dealing with divorce and custody, there can be a lot of big feelings about it. And when you get into a business professional mindset, there's less feeling that you're assigning to the words that you're writing when you're just writing the facts, basically. So that's another method that I recommend, even if you're just having difficulty in an email or in a relationship or whatever. That can also be a useful tool. And like you said, Marco Polo too, if you want face-to-face, but you don't want on-demand, like
yes,
right then and there. And then like voice texting as well. If you do better as an auditory process or a verbal processor, sending a voice memo instead of that. The only part that's difficult with that is if you need to go back and reference something. It's so much harder to find. Not that we know about anything about that.
No. Also, it's easy to get carried away and use too many words.
Yes, this is true.
The person is not there to interrupt you or cut you off or interject anything, and you're just stream of thought out your mouth.
I think that's a better one to use, like if you're more practiced with this, but you want to make sure the other person is hearing your tone of voice.
Yeah.
So like that would be like intermediate level of difficult conversation communication. So That's all I can think of, unless you have any other thoughts or questions.
No, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Moral of the story. There is no right or wrong way to communicate with someone. It's a good idea to ask somebody how they prefer to communicate and you share with them. And always ask questions for clarity.
Yes. You can find the middle ground. And one last thought on finding middle ground. Sometimes it's going to be more in your favor, and sometimes it's going to be more in their favor. Like, we need to be okay with the idea of being uncomfortable in communication, because if your only goal is to stay comfortable, you're going to miss a lot. It's going to be one-sided. So even though you may be exchanging words, you may not actually be communicating. So the goal is not comfort. The goal is understanding. And sometimes you will meet exactly in the middle, like the thing with texting Jerry first, that does meet exactly in the middle for us, but that's not always going to be the case with everybody. So anyway, thanks for chatting with me. I'll see you in like 40 minutes.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Maybe. There we go.